Welcome back, endgame fans. Now, if any of you are coaching promising young players, the position we're going to look at might be one you'd like to show them. It illustrates some important endgame themes. The ending is rook versus bishop with a pawn each. Neither of them passed. And it's from a game between Harriet Worrall and Nellie Marshall Showalter, played in their 1894 match for the United States Women's Championship in New York. Well, let's introduce the players. Harriet Worrall, who was playing white, was a widower. Her husband was Thomas Worrall, a strong amateur chess player and a member of the British Diplomatic Corps stationed in New York. When her husband died in 1878, Harriet was left in difficult financial circumstances, and sadly she suffered from depression. In 1890, she attempted suicide, and in 1894 had only recently begun playing chess again. Her opponent, Nellie Marshall Showalter, playing black, was also married to a chess player. Her husband was Jackson Showalter, nicknamed the Kentucky Lion. Nellie won an odds match against world champion Emanuel Lasker by the convincing score of 5-2, Lasker giving odds of a knight. Afterwards, Lasker claimed that Nellie had put him off his game by flashing an ankle, which was considered shocking in polite company during the early 1890s. Well, the United States Championship match was to be the first to win 7 games, but it was never completed. Nellie fell ill, leading 3-1, but Harriet declined to claim the title under these circumstances. So let's now consider the position. It's black, Showalter to play. Now in endings, although the objective is often to queen a pawn, when commencing operations, it's generally better to have your pawns on the starting second rank. And this is because the pawns then have some moves in reserve, and this can be extremely useful, particularly once you get down to a king and pawn ending. Also, it's a good idea to place your other pieces on strong squares ahead of the pawns. And of course, pawns can only move forwards, never backwards. So pawn moves are very committal, and so you only want to make them when they're clearly the best move in the position. Well, in this position, black decided to play the move b5 check. And this advance was premature and not a good move at all. Now, instead of thrusting her pawn forward, Showalter should have pushed her opponent back. And she could do this by playing the move rook f4 check. The white king has to fall back to b3. And now black can play the move king b5, opposing kings. And after the move bishop d2, black checks again, this time on the 6th rank with rook f3 check. And white is now forced to give more ground. The king goes to a2. Black attacks the a pawn with king a4. And now white is in grave difficulties. She needs to defend the a pawn. If she goes bishop b4, then black has the nice waiting move rook g3. White tries to wait with bishop d6, and now black can check again with the rook g2 check. Notice how the rook is checked on f4, f3, and now g2, forcing the white king back on every occasion. White king goes to b1, and the black king goes to b3. And now there's the threat of checkmate, which white has got to do something about. So let's move the bishop to c5, guarding the g1 square. But black can now swing the rook over to a2. And black has the simple plan of giving up the rook for bishop and pawn. After bishop b4, rook takes pawn, bishop takes rook, king takes bishop, king c2, and we can see the value of these reserved pawn moves. Black just pushes his pawn. Now the pawn push is the best move in the position, b5. And after king b1, king b3, you'll notice that black controls one of the three key squares that are a couple of ranks ahead of the passed pawn. If you control a3, b3 or c3, you will either win the game. If you don't control these squares, then white can draw the pawn ending. And here black has established control, and so it's an easy win. Okay, well, instead of protecting the pawn with bishop b4, the only other option is to protect the pawn with bishop c1. So let's see if this makes any difference. Well, black checks with rook f2. White blocks with the bishop. And now again, black has this pawn move in reserve, b5. And that forces white to give way. The king has to go to b1. Black penetrates further with king b3. And after bishop c1, rook f1 will quickly mate white. So, rook f4 check would have won very convincingly indeed. But instead, Showalter played this premature b5 check. And from here, the game proceeded as follows. White played king b4. Black went rook f1. She wants to play rook b1 check. So white played king b3. And now black played the most testing try. She went king d5. Notice though how the b5 pawn obstructs black's king. The king can no longer oppose the enemy king from the b5 square because there's a pawn stuck on that square. So here white has to be careful. If she goes bishop b4, well, the bishop suddenly gets in the way of the white king, and this allows black to penetrate with rook f3 check. So instead, white should play either bishop a5 or bishop d2. So let's go bishop d2. Now the point of this move is that if black goes king c5, white can meet this move with the check bishop b4. And if black now goes king d4, then white has the move bishop a5. Black can check on b1 with the rook, but the king attacks the rook. It goes to c2, and now the rook has to leave the b file. Let's say it goes back to f1, or white simply returns to the square b3 with his king. And if king d3, then white can go after the b pawn with king b4. And black has made no progress at all. Okay, so after bishop d2, white's only other try is to give the check rook f3. But white can attack the b pawn with king b4. Notice how that pawn is a liability in the position. Black has to retreat with king c6, and now white can go a4, liquidating the pawns. And again, illustrating another downside to this premature b5 move. It makes it much easier for white to trade the pawns, and as soon as she does that, she's likely to be left with a theoretically drawn rook versus bishop position. So bishop d2 would have held the game. And the play would have been similar after bishop a5. But instead, in this position, Worrall chose the unfortunate move, bishop h8. And this should be a losing move because it permits black to play king c5. And this is a key move enabling her to penetrate. After bishop c3, black breaches the defences with rook f3 and pushes white back again. White has to give way, king b2. Black king is aggressive, it goes to c4. Bishop falls back to e1, only to be attacked by the rook that goes to e3. White can try bishop b4, but inexorably black is making more incursions into the white position. Rook e2 check, king c1, king b3, and after bishop d6 we have the same idea as before. We just swing the rook over to a2 and give it up for the bishop and the pawn. Bishop b4, rook takes a3, bishop takes rook, king takes bishop, king c2, and now b4 will win. White can choose between king c1, which is answered by king a2, or if king b1, then black goes king b3 with control of those key squares again. So that's an easy win. However, after bishop h8, Showalter did not take advantage, and she let her opponent off the hook, because instead of king c5, she went king e4. And from here the game continued bishop b2, king d3, and the problem is that Worrall now has time for this a4 move, exploiting b5 and liquidating the pawns. Well, black had to capture, b takes a4, white took the pawn back, king takes a4, and black went king c4. Now here, white had the choice of going either king a5 or king a3. Now while neither of these moves loses, king a5 was much the safer option here. And this is partly because after king a3, the bishop on b2 rather impedes the king, but also a1 is the wrong corner. A1, the square a1 is the same colour as the bishop, and it's much more dangerous to position your king in a danger corner, in a corner that's the same colour as your bishop, when you're trying to defend the ending of bishop versus rook, than it is to position your king in a square that is an opposite colour to that of your bishop. So white would have done much better to head for a8 rather than to head for a1 here. So after king a3, Worrall was certainly living dangerously. Showalter replied with an excellent move. She went rook f7. And now white needed to find a safe square for her bishop. So where should it go? Well, the squares c3, d4, f6 and g7 are obviously out of the question because they're controlled by the king and the rook. And the move bishop a1 would also be bad in this position. Black can reply rook a7 check, and after king b2, notice how the king and bishop are very awkwardly placed. Then black has a nice move, rook a6, and after king b1, then black goes king b3. And opposing kings in this way, attacking king on b3, defending king on b1, when you're in the danger corner, is a bad sign. It usually means that you're going to lose the game relatively quickly. So here the white king can't leave the bishop, and if the bishop moves away, let's say it goes to e5, then black can attack it and threatens also to mate with rook e1, so black would have to go bishop g3. Black attacks the bishop again, has to stay on this diagonal, and now rook f3 either wins the bishop or forces checkmate. So bishop a1 would not have worked. But white does in fact have a safe square in this position. She could go bishop e5. And after rook b7, bishop f6 is available. And if black goes rook b1, then white can just go bishop b2 and she is fine. Worrall, however, decided to move her king rather than her bishop, and she went king a2, and this was a mistake because now her king is in the danger corner for sure. And from here, black can win very convincingly with rook a7 check. If she goes bishop a3 blocking the check, then simply king c3, and white loses the bishop. And if she goes king b1, then of course the black king goes to b3, achieving the ideal setup. She can't go king c1 because of rook c7 check. And if she goes king b1, then black is going to go rook f7, threatening rook f1. If king c1, then rook f1 check wins the bishop, and if bishop c1, then rook f1 forces mate. Okay, but again, Showalter didn't take her chance, and instead of playing rook a7 check, she went king b4. And after bishop a3 check, king c3, the players arrived at this position. Now, although white is still under pressure, because her king is still stuck in the danger corner, there is in fact a way out of her difficulties from here. If you'd like to see if you can find the escape route, pause the video here. Okay, well, welcome back if you had a go at the problem. Well, let's first of all look at king moves, and we'll discover that king moves just don't work here. So if white goes king a1, then black pins with rook a7, and white would then have to defend the bishop going king a2, and the move king c2 is decisive. In fact, it mates next move, so that's no good. If white goes king b1, then black can give a check, rook f1 check, and the king has to go to a2, black checks again, and after king b1, then black gets the ideal setup with king b3, and the game is easily won from here. Black will win a bishop or checkmate, as we saw previously. So king moves are not going to work, and instead white has to try a bishop move. So where can the bishop move to? Let's look at the options. Let's consider bishop c1 first. Black can meet this by going king c2, and this time opposing kings along the second rank. White goes back with the bishop, and black simply goes rook a7, and it's checkmate next move, as we saw just a moment ago. So bishop c1 is out. In the game, Worrall gave a check. She tried bishop b2 check, but after king c2, opposing kings, bishop d4, Showalter found the move rook f4, and Worrall resigned here because she loses the bishop or gets mated with rook a4. And so that only leaves us with two options, bishop c5 or bishop d6. Now, the problem with bishop c5 is it just puts the bishop too close to the enemy king. Although the win is far from obvious and is worth remembering. Black can go rook f3. And the point of this move is that king a3 isn't possible because of the discovered check, king c4 winning the bishop. So instead, after rook f3, white has to go bishop d6. Black plays king c2, the familiar theme of opposing kings, which is the key to winning these positions. And now white's best try is to go bishop h2, sheltering behind the enemy king. If you like, the bishop takes refuge in the shadow of the king, the shadow of the enemy. But from here, there's a neat manoeuvre that flushes the bishop out from its cover and leads to the win of the game. So it's well worth memorising this sequence. Black goes rook f2, and if white goes bishop g1, we go rook g2, and this flushes the bishop out. Now notice that the bishop can't go to e3 because of king d3 discovered check. So it has to go to another square. Let's say it goes to bishop c5. Suffers the same or a similar fate if it goes to other squares. Black goes rook g5. And after bishop b4, just play a little waiting move, rook g6. And this is a forced win. If we go bishop a5, we go rook a6, or if we go bishop a3, we go rook a6, and it's mate next move. So that leaves just bishop d6, and bishop d6 is the sole drawing move in this position. So congratulations if you managed to find it. It was a very difficult save to find over the board, but white now gets out of jail. Let's consider some attempts that black can make to try and win, and we'll see what happens. So first of all, if black goes rook a7 check, white goes king b1, but now after king b3, white can escape because she can go king c1, and she's got out of jail. Another attempt is to play rook b7, stopping white from going king b1, king c1, but white can now give a check, bishop e5 check, and if black tries the strategy of opposing kings, then white has got king a3, escaping the corner, going in the other direction. So the only other option that black can try is rook f3, the move that was so successful against bishop c5. But now the bishop is out of reach. The black king can't get to it in one move. And that means that king a3 is now playable, escaping. And if black goes rook d3, bishop e5 check, king c4, discovered check, white comes back with king b2, and after rook d2 check, white can go king c1, and once again she's managed to get out of jail. Okay, well, as ever, this position was chosen for its instructional value. I don't want to take anything away from Harriet Worrall or Nellie Showalter. Kudos to both of them as female chess pioneers. Thanks for watching.